September 7, 1571, the Gulf of Patras, off the western coast of Greece. Dawn comes slowly over the Ionian Sea. At first, there is only mist. Then shapes begin to emerge from the grey horizon, hundreds of them. Warships, oars, slicing the water in perfect rhythm. The creak of timber, the low thunder of drums keeping the rowing cadence. The smell of tar, sweat, and gunpowder drifting across the sea. Two vast armadas are closing in on each other. On one side, the fleet of the Ottoman Empire, more than 200 galleys arranged in a sweeping crescent across the water. Their banners ripple in the morning wind. Green silk marked with Quranic verses. Crimson flags bearing the tuggerah of the Sultan. Across the widening stretch of water, another fleet waits. Spanish, Venetian, Papal, and Genoese warships. A fragile coalition known as the Holy League. They too number in the hundreds, but unity among them is thin. Rivalries run deep. Commanders distrust each other. And yet today they face a common enemy. Cannons are loaded. Arquebusiers line the rails. Rowers, many of them chained slaves, wait for the signal that will drive them into battle. At the center of the Christian fleet stands a 24-year-old commander, Don John of Austria, half-brother of the Spanish king, a man with little battlefield experience but enormous expectations. Across the water, leading the Ottoman fleet, is a seasoned veteran, Ali Pasha, admiral of the most powerful naval empire in the world. The sea between them grows smaller. A wind shifts, a signal flag rises, and in the space of a single morning, the balance of power in the Mediterranean is about to change forever. If the Ottomans win, the western Mediterranean may fall open before them. If they lose, centuries of naval dominance could fracture in a single day. Thousands of men will die before the sun sets. Empires will tremble, and the struggle for control of the Mediterranean, one of the longest conflicts in early modern history, will reach its most violent climax. This was the Ottoman-Venetian Wars, a struggle that lasted more than 2 centuries. A struggle that shaped the fate of Europe, the Middle East, and the sea that connected them both. But one question still lingers over that mist-covered morning. How did two of the most powerful maritime civilizations on Earth become locked in a war that neither side could ever truly win? To understand the battle that erupted that morning in 1571, we must step back more than a century, back to a world on the edge of transformation. In the late 15th century, the Mediterranean was the beating heart of global commerce. Silk from Persia, spices from India, gold from Africa. Every trade route passed through these waters, and for centuries, one city had dominated that system. Venice, the Venetian Republic, was not a kingdom. It had no emperor, no dynasty. It was something far stranger, a merchant empire, a network of fortified ports, colonies and trade monopolies stretching from the Adriatic Sea to the eastern Mediterranean. Crete, Cyprus, Corfu, strategic islands that allowed Venice to control shipping lanes like toll gates on a highway. Their navy protected these routes with ruthless efficiency. Venetian galleys patrolled the sea like floating fortresses. Merchants grew wealthy. The Republic grew powerful, but by the late 1400s, a new power was rising in the east, a power that would challenge Venice at every turn, the Ottoman Empire. In 1453, Ottoman forces under Sultan Mehmed II captured Constantinople. The ancient capital of the Byzantine Empire fell after a brutal siege. Cannons shattered its walls. Ottoman soldiers flooded the streets, and the city became Istanbul. The Ottomans now controlled the gateway between Europe and Asia, but their ambitions did not stop there. The empire expanded relentlessly, across the Balkans into the Middle East, down through North Africa. By the early 16th century, the Ottomans ruled territory on 3 continents. Their army, the Janissaries, was one of the most disciplined fighting forces in the world. Their navy was growing rapidly, and they had begun to challenge Venice directly, because wherever Venetian merchants sailed, Ottoman power soon followed. Trade routes turned into front lines. Ports became battlegrounds. The First Ottoman-Venetian War erupted in 1463, and it would not be the last. The conflict that followed was not a single war. It was a series of brutal struggles spanning centuries, island by island, harbor by harbor. Venice fought to preserve its maritime empire. The Ottomans fought to replace it. At the heart of this struggle were leaders whose personalities shaped the course of history. On the Ottoman side, power ultimately rested with the Sultan. During the height of Ottoman expansion, that ruler was Suleiman the Magnificent. He was not only a conqueror but a strategist. Under his leadership, the empire reached the peak of its territorial power. Suleiman understood the Mediterranean better than most European rulers. He knew whoever controlled the sea controlled trade, and whoever controlled trade controlled wealth. To enforce that vision, he relied on brilliant naval commanders. One of the most feared among them was Hayreddin Barbarossa, a former corsair who rose through the Ottoman ranks. His fleets terrorized Christian shipping across the Mediterranean. He was bold, unpredictable, and brutally effective. Barbarossa turned the Ottoman navy into a weapon of empire. Under his command, the Ottomans defeated a combined Christian fleet at the Battle of Preveza in 1538. That victory gave them naval supremacy in the eastern Mediterranean for decades. On the Venetian side, leadership was far more complicated. Venice was governed by a senate. Decisions were debated endlessly. Strategy often became tangled in politics. Yet Venetian commanders were experienced sailors. Men raised in a culture that understood naval warfare better than almost anyone in Europe. They knew the sea, they knew the wind, and they knew the price of failure. But Venice had a weakness. Its power depended entirely on trade. War disrupted that trade. Every conflict drained the Republic's wealth. And yet surrendering territory to the Ottomans would be even worse. So the wars continued, cycle after cycle, each new conflict triggered by the same pattern: an island, a port, a strategic fortress, something too valuable for either side to abandon. By the 1560s, the most valuable prize in the eastern Mediterranean was Cyprus. The island lay at the crossroads of trade routes between Europe, the Levant, and North Africa. For Venice, Cyprus was a jewel, a profitable colony producing sugar, cotton, and grain. For the Ottomans, it was an intolerable obstacle, an enemy stronghold sitting just off their southern coast. Sultan Selim II wanted it removed, and in 1570, he ordered the invasion. The Ottoman fleet that sailed toward Cyprus was enormous. Hundreds of warships, tens of thousands of soldiers. They landed near the city of Nicosia. Venetian defenses were strong but undermanned. After weeks of siege, Ottoman forces breached the walls. The city fell. The defenders were slaughtered. Only one major fortress remained. Famagusta, its commander, was a Venetian noble named Marco Antonio Brig. He knew relief was unlikely, but he also knew surrender would mean the end of Venetian Cyprus, so he chose to fight. For nearly a year, Famagusta held out against overwhelming odds. Ottoman artillery pounded the walls day after day. Wave after wave of assaults crashed against the walls, but the defenders refused to yield. By the summer of 1571, supplies were gone. The walls were shattered. The Venetian commander Brigadine had no choice left. He negotiated a surrender. The Ottomans promised safe passage. But when the gates opened, those promises vanished. Brigadine was captured, tortured, and eventually flayed alive. News of his horrific death spread across Europe like wildfire. It shocked even the most hardened soldiers, and it utterly transformed the war. Venice could no longer fight alone. They needed allies. Reluctantly, the Christian powers of Europe began to cooperate. Spain, the Papal States, Genoa, the Knights of Malta. A coalition formed, which became known as the Holy League. But this alliance was fragile. Spain wanted to expand its influence. Venice simply wanted to survive. The papacy sought a decisive blow against Ottoman expansion. Command of their combined fleet went to Don John of Austria. He was young, charismatic, and eager to prove himself on the world stage. Throughout the summer of 1571, the Holy League assembled its mighty fleet. Galleys arrived from every corner of southern Europe, crewed by Spanish soldiers, Venetian sailors, and Genoese captains. Thousands of rowers were chained to the benches below deck. Many were prisoners, others were slaves. The warships were loaded with cannons, arquebuses, and crossbows. The fleet gathered in Messina, Sicily. The harbor buzzed with activity as training exercises filled the dais. Signals were practiced, formations rehearsed. Everyone knew the massive Ottoman fleet was still out there, somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. Both sides were searching for each other, and it was only a matter of time before they would meet. On October 7, 1571, they did. The morning of the battle began with uncertainty. The wind was unstable, and both fleets maneuvered cautiously. The Ottoman fleet, commanded by Ali Pasha, formed a wide crescent. To his right was Mem Suraco. To his left, the feared Uluj Ali, one of the most skilled admirals of the age. Across the water, the Holy League mirrored their formation. Don John commanded the center. But the Christians had a secret weapon, a critical difference in their lineup. 6 massive ships called galleasses. These were essentially floating artillery platforms, bristling with dozens of heavy cannons. As the Ottoman fleet advanced, the galleasses opened fire. At the very center of the battlefield, Don John's flagship collided directly with Ali Pasha's. The two commanders now faced each other across a narrow, blood-slicked deck. Spanish infantry surged forward, met by janissaries who fought back with terrifying discipline. The struggle lasted for hours, with both sides throwing wave after wave of reinforcements into the fray. Then, the turning point came. Ali Pasha was struck by a musket shot. He collapsed. His death shattered Ottoman morale in the center. Christian soldiers captured the flagship and raised their banner above the mast. And suddenly, the entire battlefield saw it. The Ottoman commander was dead. Across the sea, the momentum shifted decisively. Venetian forces pushed back the southern Ottoman wing, overwhelming Suraco's ships. He too was killed in fighting. Only on the northern flank did the Ottomans maintain an advantage. Uluwag Ali maneuvered skillfully, even breaking through part of the Christian line. For a moment, it seemed victory might still be possible for him. But the collapse of the center changed everything. Christian reinforcements closed the gap, and the remaining Ottoman ships began to withdraw. By late afternoon, the Battle of Lepanto was over. The sea was a horrifying scene of wreckage. Burning ships drifted across the waves, and bodies floated between shattered oars. The scale of the destruction was staggering. More than 200 Ottoman ships were captured or destroyed. Thousands of sailors were dead, and in a remarkable turn of events, approximately 12,000 Christian galley slaves were freed from the captured Ottoman ships. It was the largest naval battle in the Mediterranean for centuries, and it sent shockwaves across the known world. But victory did not bring immediate peace. For Venice, the war had already inflicted enormous damage. The island of Cyprus was lost, and their trade routes were in chaos. The Republic's finances were collapsing. Spain, meanwhile, had little interest in continuing the conflict. Their priorities lay elsewhere, in the Atlantic and the Netherlands. The Holy League, that grand alliance, slowly dissolved. Without strong allies, Venice faced a harsh reality. In 1573, they signed a peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire. Venice formally ceded Cyprus and agreed to pay a massive indemnity. The Ottomans, despite their crushing defeat at Lepanto, rebuilt their fleet within a single year. Shipyards across the empire worked day and night. Within 12 months, a new Ottoman navy was sailing the Mediterranean once again. Strategically, the battle had not destroyed Ottoman power, but psychologically, everything had changed. For decades, European fleets had feared confronting the Ottoman navy head-on. Lepanto shattered that myth. It proved the Ottomans could be beaten at sea. Yet the war also revealed a deeper truth. Neither side could fully dominate the Mediterranean. The sea was too vast, too complex, too contested. Both Venice and the Ottoman Empire made a critical mistake. They believed that controlling territory would guarantee control of trade. But maritime power didn't work that way. Dominance depended on fleets, logistics, shipbuilding capacity, and intelligence. The Ottomans underestimated the technological innovation of European naval artillery. The Holy League's galleasses had changed the nature of naval battle. At the same time, Venice underestimated the Ottoman capacity for recovery. Their empire possessed enormous resources and could bounce back from even a catastrophic defeat. Each side misjudged the resilience of the other. The Ottoman-Venetian Wars would drag on for generations after Lepanto. New conflicts erupted, new islands changed hands. But the character of warfare in the Mediterranean was slowly shifting. Gunpowder weapons became more dominant. Large sailing ships began replacing the traditional galleys. Naval warfare was moving toward long-range cannon duels rather than brutal boarding actions. The age of the galley was ending, and with it, the old system of Mediterranean empires began to fade. Venice gradually declined as trade routes shifted toward the Atlantic. New powers rose: Spain, France, England, and the Dutch Republic. The Mediterranean was no longer the center of the global economy, but the legacy of the Ottoman-Venetian Wars remains. They were among the longest maritime conflicts in history. They demonstrated the strategic importance of choke points and islands, and they revealed how trade, economics, and naval power are forever intertwined. They showed how alliances, however fragile, can alter the balance of power. Today, the Mediterranean still sits at the crossroads of continents. Modern naval forces patrol the same waters once filled with galleys and war banners, and the strategic questions remain hauntingly familiar. Who controls the sea? Who protects the trade routes? Centuries ago, Venetian merchants and Ottoman admirals fought brutal wars trying to answer those questions. Empires rose and fell, but the sea endured. The Battle of Lepanto would echo across the centuries, not because it ended a war, but because it revealed a timeless truth of power. No empire holds the sea forever, and every generation must fight again to decide who will command it next. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like and subscribe for more chapters from history.